How's it going, everybody? My name is Vincent. Most of you know me, some of you don't. I wrote my own translation of the Yoga Sutras. It's the first book I wrote. The Yoga Sutras is a very essential and powerful text. It's probably the epitome of Sankhya philosophy. There are 200 sutras in the text, and the text is about emancipation from the cycle of samsara. So in my opinion, the goal of the Yoga Sutras and the goal of Buddhism is the same thing: liberation. The Dhammapada is extremely potent and describes it in a different way. There's only 200 sutras in the entire text. If you've never been exposed to it, the text is very powerful. It helps to end suffering, bring peace, presence, love, light. Sutra 2.1. The actions of yoga are religious austerity, recitation of the sutras, and devout worship of whatever created this reality. In my translations, I give multiple translations for each verse, and that's what makes my Yoga Sutras and my Dhammapada different from everybody else's. Nobody else does a comparative reasoning edition. Most people have either just the sutra or the sutra with a commentary. I have comparative reasoning. So when I translated it over from Sanskrit into English and compared it to all the available text, I put together translations that I feel could embody the original Sanskrit or the original spoken languages. Sutra 2.1. Burning earnestness in practice, study of the self, and surrender to God are the constituents of yoga. Third translation. Accepting pain as help for purification, study of spiritual text, and surrender to the Supreme Being are the acts of yoga. The purifying actions in yoga are tapas, discipline, study, and surrender to God. So part of the reason why I'm studying the sutras with you guys is because you have to recite them over and over again. So I'm giving up television this year. I'm giving up movies. I was watching like Resident Evil and stuff like that. And I was wondering why my mind was working in such a way. But you have to recite these sutras. If you recite these sutras, it brings about a dramatic change, and it brings enlightenment, peace, happiness, samadhi in your life. Samadhi is the ultimate goal of this text. So I'm going to read one more time. Burning earnestness in practice, study of the self, and surrender to the God are the constituents of yoga. The third translation is accepting pain as help for purification, study of spiritual text, and surrender to the Supreme Being are the acts of yoga. So if you're just coming in, you can leave a comment. Let's move on to 2.2. Sutra 2.2. Practicing yoga reduces the hindrances to spiritual enlightenment. Second translation, Sutra 2.2. The goal of yoga is to put an end to afflictions and achieve samadhi. Third translation, 2.2. Discipline, study, and surrender to God reduce obstacles and bring absorption, samadhi. So, if you know what samadhi is, if you know what the jhana states are, there's really no need to talk about it. But if you don't know what samadhi is absorption of the mind, body, emotion, spirit, and soul in the present moment. That's what samadhi is. And they get really deep into samadhi. And that's why you have to study these sutras. Sutra 2.3. Ignorance, egotism, desire for pleasure, aversion to pain, and fear of death are the 5 afflictions which disturb the equilibrium of consciousness. Now, when you're reading these, you have to embody the text. So what the sages say, Buddha, Patanjali, these sages, they say you should know the text forward and backwards, word for word, but they also say you should embody its essence. So the repetition of the text will let you know what the text is, but when you hear the words of the text, just to hear the words is a blessing. Because if you're hearing these words, there's a chance that you might get out of some sorrow. If you don't hear the words, there's very little chance that you're going to get out of some sorrow. So here, after you hear the word, you're supposed to absorb it and then embody its essence. There's actually an energy exchange. The 5 obstacles to spiritual enlightenment are lack of wisdom, self-centeredness, attachment, hatred, and clinging to bodily life. The mental obstacles are ignorance, egotism, attachment, hatred, and grasping at impermanence. That's why I'm telling you, the Yoga Sutras is so potent. It's not watered down at all. It's each line, basically, Patanjali was trying to give us each line in a minimal, concise way so that we can attain samadhi in as short of a time as possible. 2-3 is very important. In these sutras, there are some sutras which you can do without, and there are other sutras that are extremely important. Most of them are important. Maybe there's 20 that aren't. But these here, the beginning of the second pada, are just to understand the concept here is important. So take it in. Lack of wisdom is the source of suffering. Second translation. Lack of true knowledge is the source of all pain and sorrow. The pain and sorrow may be dormant, slightly developed, occasional, or sustained. So right here, Patanjali is telling you, any type of pain that you're experiencing it, the only reason why you're experiencing it is because you don't have the right knowledge. That's why this sutra right here is extremely important. How many people do we see that are suffering? You can't, every day you see people that are suffering. You're suffering, I'm suffering, we're all suffering, right? We're all experiencing pain, some kind of pain, physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain. Right here it says, lack of wisdom is the cause of all pain, stress, worry, fear, doubt. So that's why this text is so important. The third translation here is, ignorance is the root of the other obstacles. These obstacles can be inactive, weak, sometimes active, or fully active. So ignorance means you don't know. I know some people, they get offended when they hear the word ignorant, but the word ignorance simply means you don't know. So it's not something that gives offense. And it's actually spoken that if somebody corrects you, it's supposed to be a blessing. So as a Buddhist, if somebody corrects you, it's supposed to be a blessing. If you find yourself when you're getting corrected going, what is that? Then you have to really ask yourself. Of course, sometimes people are correcting you imperfectly or something like that. You shouldn't even be corrected. That does happen. Grasping at things that are impermanent, misjudging the pure and impure, aversion to pain, desire for pleasure, and self-centeredness are caused by lack of wisdom. So this sutra right here, 2.5, 2.5 goes with 4.4. 2.4. 2.4 says, lack of wisdom is the cause of all suffering. 2.5 says, grasping at things that are impermanent, misjudging the pure and impure, aversion to pain, desire for pleasure, and self-centeredness are caused by lack of wisdom. So just think about that for a second. Take that in. That's what? So I give 3 translations for this sutra. Due to lack of spiritual knowledge, one mistakes the transient for the permanent, the impure for the pure, pain for pleasure, and that which is not self as self. All you need to do is hear these 2 lines, 2.4 and 2.5. If you just hear these 2 lines and take them in, it'll completely and totally change your aspect for the rest of your life. These 2 lines are so important. 2.5. Ignorance is mistaking the temporary as permanent, the impure as pure, distress as pleasant, and non-self as the self. We'll move on to 2.6. Egotism is when one considers themselves to be the mind and body. I remember I learned ego in school, and they were breaking down Sigmund Freud and said ego, the id, but they didn't really explain what the ego was. Here, Patanjali is explaining what the ego is. Egotism is the identification of the soul with the instruments of the 5 gross senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and feeling. Misunderstanding the seer to be the power of seeing is egotism. Those 2-6 guys is so important. That's definitely one that you have to repeat. You really got to get 2-6. Now, when it goes into these sutras, they're very fast, but they're extremely important. So if you're hearing this right now, take it in, because just hearing this sutra, I'm telling you, will change your life forever. They're so important. They're so potent. 2-7. First translation: pleasure results in desire and emotional attachment. That simply means you look, you see a rose, you like the rose, you want to look at the rose more. You eat pleasant food, you want to eat pleasant food more. You look at a pleasant member of the opposite sex, you want to look at the pleasant member of the opposite sex more, right? Attachment comes from the experience of pleasure. So right here, they're explaining pleasure results in desire and emotional attachment. Emotional attachment of what? Attachment of the soul. That's why I love this text. See, this text talks about the soul, explains how the soul gets entangled. You don't get that in the other text. This text includes that. 2-8, the mental impressions left by pain result in hatred. Second translation, 2-8, suffering leads to aversion. Translation 3, hatred comes from the experience of unhappiness. Another sutra that is just wow. 2-9, attachment to life and self-preservation are the most subtle hindrance. Even the wise struggle with this affliction. Second translation, longing for life flows on its own accord. It is firmly established even in wise people. Third translation, fear of death is built in the flesh for human survival. No one is above this. So what are they saying here? He's saying that we're all born scared to die. At least it's in our genetic makeup that we don't want to die. So because of this, we have to have a house, we have to have enough food, we have to have money saved in the bank, all these things, and then we get anxious and nervous, right? Because you could die, it could end, you could lose it. Who knows? It might not work out. So here, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Welcome. So here you understand that fear of death is the cause of all stress. Before that, wanting pleasure and not wanting to experience pain. Sutra 210. Hindrances and fetters can be relinquished by eliminating self-centeredness and returning the mind to clarity, which is its natural state. So these are hindrances and fetters, hindrances of the mind that keep the soul from experiencing pure happy existence, nirvana, rapture, samadhi, omniscience and omnipresence. That's what this text is about. Thanks for joining. The second translation, hindrances are to be minimized and eradicated by introspection. This means after you go through an intense, stressed out experience, after you go through an experience of pain, you're supposed to examine it with your intellect. And by examining it with your intellect, you find out its cause. Then as you do this, it unravels. It's an unraveling. By returning them to their original source, these afflictions can be overcome while they are still in subtle form. Fourth translation, 210. Thanks for joining. These obstacles can be destroyed by resolving them back into their primal cause, which is ego. So the hindrances to spiritual enlightenment, which are desire for pleasure, aversion to pain, lack of knowledge, and fear of death, all four of these causes, which cause us to have stress, worry, fear, doubt, and pain, actually causes physical suffering, can be resolved by meditating on them and having your intellect and your mind come back into being one with your soul. Recite this whole text, all the sutras. This text has to be recited. Recitation is the ultimate cure for the samsara. You have to recite the text. Thanks for joining. This is Sutra 211. Through practice of meditation, the fluctuations of consciousness created by gross and subtle afflictions are silenced. I'll give the second translation of Sutra 211, guys. The hindered mind states can be overcome through meditation. So these stressed out mind states that we find ourselves in, the states of worry, doubt, fear, and pain, can be overcome by meditating. The third translation. By being mindful of the present moment, the active defilements of the mind can be destroyed. So if you destroy the defilements of the mind, the pain of the body follows. See? It's the defilements in the mind that are causing the pain of the body, because it's connected to your DNA. They take everything into consideration. Your DNA, your physical body, your karma, your spirit, your soul, your mind, your intellect, and your memory. All these things have to be taken into consideration, because it's what you are, it's what you're made out of. Because there is no separation. The actuality is the universe is an ongoing event, and we're one with it. So because we're one with this ongoing event, our intellect and our memory cause us to separate from it. And it causes us to not want to be a part of it. We get scared. We have fear, doubt, worry. It causes us to want more of what we like. We want more soda. We want more fruit juice. We want more whatever it is. We want more of what we like. We want to avoid what we don't like, and we don't want to die. So because of this, the mind's constantly going, and we can't enjoy this beautiful, omnipresent existence that we live in. This is Sutra 212. Thanks for joining. Welcome. You can comment below if you guys have any questions on it. Let me know. This is my translation. Sutra 212. Our previous actions and reactions have been good or bad. Due to our previous experience, we either like or dislike things. This causes afflictions. Our previous actions and reactions are stored in the Akashic record and may ripen at any time during this life or the next. That's translation 1. My translation is the only one that uses comparative reasoning, guys. So I give multiple translations for each translation because it's hard to capture the Sanskrit and bring it into English. So this is the second translation. We're on Sutra 212. We're going to do the whole second pada today. The hindrances are rooted in the accumulated imprints of past lives. It is because of our previous actions and reactions that our current and future situations occur. Third translation for this sutra. These obstacles to peace and happiness exist in the store of karmas and bring about experiences in present and future lives. So even the mental continuum is said to go on with you after this life. After this life, everything that you do, everything that you think, everything that you choose, everything that you eat, every action that you take, everything you find pleasant and ugly goes with you onto your next life, goes with you after death. And that causes these situations that ripen to occur. Sutra 213, you have to know all the sutras. You have to know the entire pada and all of the sutras. This is the second pada, guys. It's going to be an ongoing study. 213, as long as the idea of a separate self exists, it will give rise to lifespan, experiences, and the type of birth one takes. Okay, I understand that. Second translation. The existence of the root of actions gives rise to class of birth, the length of a being's life, and the fortune one experiences. Third translation. When this basis exists, it will bear fruits. These fruits are the birth of different species, the lifespan that a being has, and the experiences that arise during that life. Moving on to Sutra 214. Pleasure and pain are caused by merit and demerit, which is the result of our previous actions and reactions. Second translation is Sutra 214. The fruits that karma bears transforms into joy and misery, which depend on if the karma is shaped by virtue or non-virtue. Third sutra. The negative and positive energy exuded by our body, mind, and soul affects the physical manifestation of our future and present moment. Negative energy manifests as painful experiences, while positive energy manifests as pleasurable ones. We're going to move on to Sutra 215, guys. Thanks for joining. Transformations cause misery, mental impressions cause suffering, and the conflict of the energetic forces of the universe cause discomfort. Therefore, wise and discriminative beings see that all life is tinged with pain and suffering. Sutra 215, if you haven't heard this before, it's good karma to even hear this. I gave 4 translations for this. This is the second translation. The wise know that due to fluctuations, the way in which one attribute of the world conflicts with another, and latent mental impressions that even pleasant experiences are tainted with sorrow. Knowing this, they remain estranged from them. So, the wise sages understands that pleasure and happiness is tinged with unhappiness and pain. So what the yoga is doing these practices to develop your mind and your spirit to overcome the cycle of pleasure and pain, which is samsara, and attain samadhi. And there's different levels to samadhi, and that is in this text. It comes up in the study, so you have to recite the text over and over again. Thanks for joining. One with discernment views all life as suffering due to the misery caused by the nature of impermanence, suffering caused by physical, mental, and emotional attachment, and the chaotic nature of duality. Fourth translation. For the wise with discrimination, everything is painful due to its consequences. Losing what is gained creates anxiety and fear. Impressions left in the mind create craving, and conflict among the three gunas disturb the mind. You're supposed to hear the sutra and then contemplate it. If you have any questions or comments, please put in the comments below. We're going to move right on to Sutra 216. It is possible to prevent future suffering. Second translation. Pain that has not yet come should be avoided. So here, they're saying it's possible to live a life that's completely free of pain and suffering. Thanks for joining. Questions, please put below. We're on Sutra 217 of the second pada. Preventing contact between the soul and perceivable world prevents further suffering. Did you get that? The cause of pain is the identification of the seer with the seen, and the remedy is in their disassociation. I give 4 translations for this one. The cause of avoidable pain is the joining of the soul with the seen. Preventing the soul from becoming attached to things experienced by the physical senses removes the cause of further suffering. Sutra 217 is just right there. Okay, I don't want to experience pain anymore. How do I not experience pain anymore? Just keep your soul from becoming entangled into the physical world of the senses, and then you'll never experience pain again for the rest of eternity. Thanks for joining. Sutra 218. Nature has the qualities of clarity, activity, and stillness. This, along with the elements in the senses, provides experiences for enjoyment and the liberation of the soul. Second translation for 218. If you're hearing these sutras for the first time, take them in, try to introspect on them, and try to embody the meaning of the sutra. 218. The perceivable world can appear illuminated, active, or still. It gives birth to the elements, mind, senses of perception, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and feeling, and organs of action, vocal cords, hands, feet, organs of excretion, and reproductive organs. It can be used for enjoyment or liberation from rebirth. Third translation. Nature, the 3 gunas, the gunas are the driving forces of the universe, the forces of the universe that make things change, called the gunas. The mind, the senses of perception, and the organs of action exist to serve the seer for enjoyment and emancipation. So here they're telling you what the purpose of life is and why everything is happening. He's saying the purpose of life is to enjoy life and emancipate the soul from entanglement. Right there. I mean, why don't they start that off with all spiritual stuff? Like, hey, by the way, the purpose of life is to enjoy life and to free your soul from being attached to physical things. I mean, if that's the first thing somebody ever taught you, it'd be a great thing, right? Thanks for joining. 219. The gunas initiate the material and energetic fluctuations which are projected into the soul. These fluctuations are specific, non-specific, differentiable, and non-differentiable. The gunas project their characteristic divisions and energies in the seer. Their stages are distinguishable and non-distinguishable, definable or undefinable. Sutra 220. The soul is only the pure power of seeing, which observes the world through the mirror of the mind. If you're just joining in, thanks for joining. This is Dhammapada, Yoga Sutras, second pada. Sutra 220, second translation. The seer is entirely pure and only observes, but it still perceives the world through conceptualism. Third translation. The soul is pure consciousness. It witnesses nature without being reliant on it. Sutra 221. Thanks for joining. Please leave questions, comments below. What is experienced through the senses exists for the purpose of the soul's emancipation. Second translation. Spiritual enlightenment is the main purpose behind the existence of the perceived world. Third translation. The utmost reason for the existence of nature and intelligence is to induce the liberation of the soul. Sutra 222. Spiritual enlightened beings are no longer affected by physical and energetic impermanent transmutation, but beings who have not attained this state are still affected by them. Sutra 222, second translation. Although the perceived world ceases to exist when the soul is liberated from the worldly affairs, it still exists for other beings. Sutra 222, third translation. For emancipated beings, the relationship with nature ceases, but nature's processes continue to affect beings who have not liberated the soul. Sutra 223. The state of union between the soul and the seen is for the soul to discover its own true nature. Second translation. The union of the seer and the perceivable world occurs for the seer to understand the absolute truth about the energies of the owner and the owned. Sutra 224. Thanks for joining. Please leave questions and comments below. Lack of wisdom is the root cause of the soul becoming attached to the physical world. Second translation. Lack of spiritual understanding causes the false identification of the seer with the seen. So it's lack of spiritual understanding that causes your soul to become entangled with the physical world. Moving on to Sutra 225. Through proper knowledge, the light of wisdom dawns, destroying ignorance and liberating the soul from the perceivable world. Second translation for Sutra 225. When ignorance ceases, the link binding the seer to the seen also ceases. This state is known as kaivalya, separation from the world. So after doing these sutras, studying them for 10 months, I actually felt the state of my soul being completely unattached to the physical world. But then television, desires, things like that brought me back into it. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this study, because you have to repeat the sutras until you attain the ultimate state. Sutra 226, first translation. Steady, uninterrupted discernment eradicates ignorance, the source of pain. So here, when we meditate, we're focusing on discernment. Discernment is the front part of the brain here, the third eye. So you're focusing on this part of the brain and you're always trying to contemplate and discern. When you can discern steady for long periods of time, that eradicates the lack of your knowledge. And when you have the knowledge, it eradicates pain. The vigilant, uninterrupted flow of discriminative knowledge in thought, word, and deed destroys ignorance. The cessation of ignorance is achieved by the continuous application of discriminative understanding. So by focusing here and trying to understand anything, that eradicates lack of knowledge. It has to be practiced for a long, steady period of time. It has to be practiced for a long time for it to become firmly grounded. Otherwise, we practice and go back to samsara, practice and go back to samsara. Many are those who walk up and down the beach, but few are those who make it to the other shore. And that's the Dhammapada. And that's why I do the Dhammapada and the Yoga Sutras, because they're both just so potent texts. Sutra 227. Through the unbroken flow of discriminative awareness, one attains perfect wisdom, which is sevenfold. One experiences the end of the desire to know anything more, the desire to stay away from anything, the desire to gain anything new, the desire to do anything, sorrow, fear, and delusion. The realization derived from steady, uninterrupted discernment is sevenfold and reaches the ultimate point of absolute truth. So after studying, you get to a point, why would I even do anything anymore? Why would I even study anything anymore? I'm omnipresent. I understand oneness with the universe. My soul is liberated from the cycle of pain and pleasure, from samsara. My soul is liberated. I don't even have to know anything anymore. I'm just going to sit here like this until I attain full nirvana. That's what they're saying. 228. Through devout practice of the 8 limbs of yoga, impurities are destroyed and the crown of wisdom radiates gloriously. Second translation. When one dedicates themselves to the practice of yoga, impurities dwindle away and spiritual wisdom arises. This leads to enlightened vision. Perfect clarity dawns when one becomes pure through the practice of yoga. Sutra 229. Welcome. The 8 limbs of yoga are universal morality, observances, steady, comfortable, aware posture, breath regulation, withdrawing the senses inwards towards the soul, concentration, meditation, absorption of consciousness in the soul. I give 2 translations for Sutra 229. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, so that's ethical standards, spiritual adherences, body alignment, building of internal energy, building of or internalizing the senses, concentration, stilling the mind, and super consciousness are the 8 limbs of yoga. Moving right on to Sutra 230. Non-violence, truthfulness, never stealing, abstaining from sexual activity, and non-possessiveness are the universal moralities. Second translation. Non-violence, honesty, not stealing, celibacy, control of the senses, internal energy cultivation, and absence of greed for possessions beyond what one needs are the spiritual adherences. 231. These noble vows are universal and apply to any social class, location, time, or circumstance. Sutra 232. Purity, contentment, self-discipline, study, and worship of God are the observances. Sutra 233. When disturbing negative thoughts arise, think of their opposite. Sutra 234. When negative thoughts or actions are being done, either directly or indirectly, or even approved of, it is caused by greed, anger, or delusion, and is either mild, medium, or intense in degree. Through introspection, the cycle of pain and ignorance are ended. Sutra 235. When you master non-violence in speech, thought, and action, your aggressive nature is relinquished. All beings will then abandon hostility in your presence. Sutra 236. When one masters honesty, any words spoken instantly manifest into reality. Sutra 237. When you completely abandon stealing as an option, wealth and abundance will come to you. Sutra 238. Knowledge, vigor, valor, and energy to flow to one, pardon me. Knowledge, vigor, valor, and energy flow to one who has mastered continence. When you firmly establish yourself in principle of celibacy, you will acquire creativity, strength, virility, and potency. $239. When one is free from greed for possessions, the details of previous births become known. Second translation. Knowledge of past and future lives unfold when you master the principle of not seeking ownership. Sutra 240. As a result of practicing purity, one develops disinterest in contact with others for self-gratification. Through cleanliness of body and mind, one develops a distaste for lust. Sutra 241. When the body is cleansed, the mind purified, and the senses controlled, joyful awareness needed to perceive the soul occurs. Second translation. When the principle of purity is mastered and one becomes completely pure, their existence is also purified. Then one naturally gains grateful disposition, the ability to focus on a single object, mastery over the senses, and the ability to realize the inner self. Sutra 242. When one masters contentment, supreme joy is attained. The result of the practice of contentment is unsurpassed happiness. So as soon as we become completely content with what we have and not unhappy with what we don't have, we attain supreme happiness. By accepting but not causing pain, impurities of the body and senses are destroyed, and higher powers are acquired. Second translation. Self-discipline burns away impurities and sparks a holy spiritual fire, giving one occult powers. Sutra 244. Through devout study, higher understanding is achieved. Self-study leads to God realization. Third translation. Study of the spiritual text leads to spiritual enlightenment. Fourth translation. By repeated study of the holy words comes communion with one's chosen deity. That's why I give 4 translations for this text. I think the first translation is definitely the best. Through devout study, higher understanding is achieved. Self-study leads to God realization, but it's saying you have to study. You have to study the spiritual text. And you have no idea how important what you feed your mind is. What you feed your mind is so important. It's extremely important. If you feed the Yoga Sutras to your mind, you'll attain samadhi. If you don't, you won't. It's just that simple. Sutra 245. Surrender to God leads to perfection in samadhi. Second translation. By total surrender to the incoming energy of the universe, there is success in attaining the state of samadhi. Sutra 246. The posture should be steady, comfortable, and aware. So here, 246, you should practice keeping the body steady, strong, comfortable, and aware. You have to be aware of the body. 247. One has mastered asana when exertion becomes effortless and the mind is focused on infinity. (248). After one has mastered body awareness, they will no longer be disturbed by pairs of opposites. 249. After asana is mastered, regulation of inhalation and exhalation should be practiced. I'll give the second translation for this one. Regulation of the incoming and outgoing breath with retention is pranayama. It should be practiced only after one practices asana. Thank you for joining. The three movements of breath are inhalation, exhalation, and retention. They are either long or short and are to be regulated by space, time, and number. I'm going to give the third translation for this too. One breath cycle has three distinct parts. They are inhalation, exhalation, and stationary. When governed by place, time, and number, the breath becomes long and subtle like a gentle flowing stream. Sutra 251. There is a fourth kind of pranayama that is more subtle than the three gross aspects. This sutra here is very important for people who work with energy. When you're doing your breath work, you're saying there's a fourth type of pranayama that transcends breath. And what I can tell you after doing this practice for 16 years and being a Qigong practitioner, a Reiki practitioner, after you're doing the breath work for such an amount of time, you're able to work with energy that's beyond breath. Life force energy, elemental energy, universal energy, akashic energy. Sutra 252. When one masters breath regulation and awareness, the veil covering the light of knowledge is removed and true wisdom dawns. Through repeated practice of breath meditation, confusion is clarified and one attains the light of wisdom. Sutra 253. When one is accomplished in the practice of pranayama, the mind becomes ready for concentration. So this is very important, guys. In the Yoga Sutras, it's saying that you have to practice pranayama, which is breath regulation and breath awareness, in order to make the mind steady for meditation. And in Buddhism, the Buddha teaches anapanasati. It's a very well-known practice, which is breath awareness. But here the Sutras is telling you, you have to practice your pranayama or your anapanasati to prepare your mind for meditation. Sutra 254. Pratyahara is withdrawing from the senses, or pratyahara is withdrawing the senses, mind, and consciousness away from contact with external objects and inwards towards the soul. So the fourth limb of yoga, the third limb is pranayama, the fourth limb is pratyahara. Pratyahara is withdrawing the senses, mind, and consciousness away from contact with external objects and inwards towards the soul. That's what pratyahara is. The second translation. When the senses disregard the objects of outside world and withdraw inwards through the mind towards the seer, pratyahara occurs. I'm refreshing myself. I haven't heard these sutras. I had attained such a state. Work in earthly things. Deep embedded desires. 255. One gains complete mastery over the sense organs from the practice of pratyahara. Pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses away from the physical world and in towards the soul, is absolute control over the senses, the five main senses. Thanks so much for watching, guys. That's the second pada. So I'm going to be doing an ongoing Dhammapada and Yoga Sutra study. My translations are the only translations that have the comparative reasoning translations. I'm the only one who has comparative reasoning translations. I'll put the link in the description below. Any questions or comments about these texts, please let me know. But the reason why we're studying these texts, I just said during the session, they are to recite the text over and over so that you can never experience pain or unhappiness again, to reach samadhi or nirvana, or what I guess you could call rapture. These three things. That is the purpose of this text. And what you feed your mind grows, and it affects your reality and shapes who you are and what your experience is, what your conscious experience is. And this book here is definitely one of the essential texts. Thanks so much, guys. Be well.